The blaze that gutted the illegally occupied Usindiso building has been described as an abnormal fire. That's according to Johannesburg Emergency Services Platoon Commander Thipe, who was present on the day of the fire. Thipe is the third witness to appear before the Commission of Inquiry into Johannesburg's Marshalltown inferno that claimed 76 lives, left dozens more homeless. Now, he told the commission, chaired by Constitutional Court Justice Sisi Khampepe, that the boards used to partition rooms fueled the flames. Yesterday, the commission heard of the fire hazardous material like shacks constructed out of glue laminated plywood, and that emergency evacuation exits were blocked by boxes, brick walls, and even locked gates. Thipe has told the commission that firefighters had to break through locks to access every room and every floor, which was locked. Charred bodies were found mostly on the first and second floor of the 5-story building. The firefighter and other high-ranking Johannesburg Emergency Services officials have concluded their testimony. On day 2 of the inquiry, the commission is investigating the cause of the fire and what can be done to prevent the tragic event from happening again. Human rights activist Andrew China, as well as Nomzamo Zondo from Socio-Economic Rights Institute of South Africa, joins us via video link to unpack the importance of this inquiry. Andy and Nomzamo, good afternoon to the both of you, and thank you for your time with us here on the SABC. All right, Nomzamo, if you can hear me, let me start with you. Andy, I'll bring you into the conversation. Perhaps the inquiry that has been undertaken over the past 2 days, you could speak to the impact of the inquiry since it began, the progress, the efficacy as well, given the testimonies are being unearthed.
Thank you so much. So, it's very difficult to speak about the impact of the inquiry since we are only at day 2.
Sure.
The reality is, I think, one, you can see that some preparation has gone into the evidence that's going to be led by the evidence leaders. But unfortunately, the victims have not been part of the process, even though yesterday attorneys who represent them and counsel came on record. Those counsel do not yet have any of the material that the commission is referring to. And then that makes it difficult to speak about what the impact of that will be. I think as SERI specifically, we've been concerned about the participation of the victims. As we were in the commission yesterday and today, there have been no victims in the room. More concerning, I think, for us was the fact that in reality, even those who have passed away, we were informed that as of last weekend, over 30 of the deceased were not yet identified. And when we engaged with the victims about why this was, it was clear that there hasn't been any streamlining of assistance to the families of the deceased to assist them in making sure that their people are identified. In fact, it's not even necessarily a matter. There are families who have gone to Diepkloof who suspect that their family members were killed in the fire, but they have not been assisted because the department has insisted that is their mothers who must give DNA. Similarly, I think for those who are injured, there is a question to those who are injured and hospitalized about what will happen to them. Those who remain in hospital now, none of them know where they would go after they are discharged. It was a similar experience for those who were discharged soon after the fire. And I think, of course, in the last few days, we've been hearing reports about the fact that those who have been living in the city-provided shelters have been receiving threats of eviction, that they've had their power, electricity disconnected, that they've had the storeroom that keeps food locked away. And these are concerns. So as the commission sits here, speaking about justice for those victims, how can we do that in an environment where clearly there's been a failure in the government to coordinate a response to those victims? These are people who've suffered probably the most extreme and traumatic event that we've seen in the last few years. They've seen over 70 people pass away in a matter of hours. And it seems that there hasn't been really any understanding on the side of the state that this requires a multifaceted and structured intervention to support those victims.
Nomzamo, let me come in there at this point, given what is required. I wonder if we could also begin to highlight some of the key issues on the back of the context that you provided since the inquiry began. The key issues emerging in addressing the inferno aftermath, given South Africa's socio-economic landscape.
Look, interestingly, Our country is quite prepared. In fact, we have had such instances in the past. In fact, as a lawyer, we even have case law that kind of indicates what steps government can take in such instances. In fact, the city of Tshwane, in relation to Schubert Park, went to court and rolled out an intervention to assist those victims. The city of Johannesburg, this is not the first fire, of course, it's the most fatal fire they've experienced. But it would have been easy for them to provide a joint operations center where they provide counseling to the victims, where they ensure that those who are in hospital are assisted, those who suspect that their loved ones have been killed know where to go, and that they are themselves assisted in making sure that their loved ones are identified. The fact that we sit now 7 weeks post the fire and there are people who have not been identified is really an indictment in that government. And I think it would be much better if we were able to say there is a small office in a building somewhere in the city of Johannesburg, when all the victims know they can go and knock if they need social assistance. They know they can go and knock if they need housing assistance. They go and they can knock if they need psychological support or other socio-economic support. We have the structures available. We have the experience to do this. In fact, Seri was involved in the Marikana Commission of Inquiry. And in that Commission of Inquiry, yes, in the beginning, some of the support was not there, but the Department of Justice, together with the representatives of the victims, including the minors and the families, were able to put in place systems to make sure that the victims are supported. So in our socio-economic circumstances, we know we've been through this and we could do better.
No, absolutely, Nomzamo, and thank you for those sentiments. I want to bring Andy now into the conversation, just on the back of what Nomzamo's echoed, highlighting, what's emerged during the inquiry. And at this point, from your vantage point, in fact, what are some of the issues directly affecting the fire victims, and what actions are needed, both in the short and long term?
Well, you can have a whole list of things that needs to be done, but if there's no will to get it done, it won't get done. So if this firstly was identified as a disaster, not some little incident as it was communicated yesterday at the commission. One of the fire chiefs yesterday said this is an incident. It's considered an incident. It's not an incident. It's a disaster. And what should have happened is a full disaster management plan should have been rolled out, which included provision of adequate housing. So right now, as I speak to you right now, there are people at the shelter that don't have food. Babies don't have nappies. And we are trying to raise this. A simple thing of where we have negotiated with pro bono legal services. People cannot get to the offices of those legal people. And yesterday I had to listen to the JMPD saying that they provided a bus for all officials to arrive at the scene of that accident. And surely, if they really want to see a commission that reflects the sentiments and the views of the victims, they should have made these plans. In terms of the shelter itself, Hoffland Park is a recreation center. It doesn't even have portable toilets right now. You've got one set of toilets and one set of showers, one for women, one for men. A simple thing such as portable toilets to cater for 100 men, 36 women, 28 children is the bare basics that you need for a disaster. People have faced trauma, and they're facing even more trauma by being put into a recreation center for over 50 days now.
Andy, speaking about the
psychological services.
Andy, speaking about the trauma that you've alluded to, what are tensions arising in the community, perhaps amongst those who are frustrated, given the reality that they are facing? Could you give us an update on what's transpiring on that front?
Okay, so you got frustration from both the community around that actually uses the recreation center, in terms of they've scheduled things to, like weddings, and they're not able to use those the facilities. But within the facility itself, people are obviously, I don't understand why people find it strange that people, will have a few tiffs or disagreements. During COVID, we all know that we lived in our comfortable homes and we still had differences with our loved ones. Now you've got 100 people, 100 men, 36 women, 28 children in a facility, and you obviously, because you're in such a confined space, you are going to have a few differences.
Andy, thank you for weighing in on that. I want to bring Nomzamo back into the conversation, just as interest of time. Andy has alluded to questioning whether there's a will to act. And from your vantage point, how would you weigh in on that? What is the future if there is a blame game of sorts? Questioning whether there's a will to act. Will hijackers and homeowners be held accountable and be prosecuted? Nomzamo, if you can hear me, perhaps you could weigh in. I mean, Andy's just alluded to some of the psychosocial trauma experienced to date, the needs of the community, the frustrations that have also emerged, questioning whether there is a will to act. My question to you perhaps is on the back of that, what future is there if there's a blame game that continues to exist and there's a lack of prosecution amongst the hijackers, even owners who are not held accountable? What are you observing on that front?
So one, I think, for instance, the Commission of Inquiry will have a crucial role to play in making sure that evidence is aired out about who one was active in the building, the role of the City of Johannesburg as an owner of the building. And if there are people who are collecting rent in the building, then if the Commission, one, gathers the evidence, or if the police themselves are able to gather the evidence, it will be interesting to see if they prosecute. Because again, when we first heard of the news of the fire, the City of Johannesburg told us that there were arrests in 2019. We have not heard of what happened to those arrests. We've not heard that following those arrests there were criminal prosecutions, whether people were convicted or people were acquitted. But in this instance that we're in now, it's really, really important that there is accountability for the fire. There's accountability for the City of Johannesburg, which is the owner of the building. There's accountability for those who played a role in bringing us here. I think in the one thing that is concerning is that in the 2 days we've sat in the commission, we've heard about the conditions of the building. And the way that those have been presented, they've been presented in a way that kind of says probably the residents have brought themselves in this situation. And I think it's important for us to, one, remember the role that the City of Johannesburg has to play, not only as a property owner, but also as the member, as the sphere of government that has responsibility to residents in the City of Johannesburg. From the information that it had, how did it act? How did it intervene? And I think those questions hopefully will be aired out in this commission.